We've all seen people who drive really nice fast cars and live in beautiful homes. Have you ever wondered, how do they get there? I'm Kevin Watson, and I love really nice cars. On this show, we dive into our guest stories of what they dreamed of having when they first started out and how they achieved their dreams over time.
This is The Kevin Watson Show.
Today, we are interviewing one of my mentors, probably my favorite mentor, Mike Hardwick, and he is the CEO and founder. I was going to say owner, but you sold the company to us, which is awesome. Yeah. And the founder of Churchill Mortgage Corporation, based right here in Brentwood, Tennessee. And we're interviewing Mike. And Mike, I understand you have a really cool car or two.
Or three,
yeah,
or four. I'm Kevin. I have a few weaknesses in my life, as I assume most everyone does.
Yes.
And one of my weaknesses, I love cars.
Oh, I do too.
And through the years,
have you always, like when you were a little kid, did you always love cars?
You know what? I'm glad you asked that, because I remember as a little kid. In fact, I talked about this in my book because I messed up.
Chopping wood, right?
Yeah, Keep Chopping Wood's a book I
Yep.
wrote a few years ago. But I remember as a little boy, one of my favorite things to do was when my mom or father would take me down to Garrett Drugstore in Woodbine, and they would buy me a model car that I could build myself.
Okay,
And
yeah.
it came in a bunch of parts.
Yeah.
And then I'd buy the colors of paint I wanted to paint the car with. I used to love to put those things together.
Yeah.
And so I talk about that in my book in one chapter, because it was one of the first times in my life, and I wish we had more time. Maybe you can go read my book sometime.
Yeah.
But I messed up and I stole something.
Okay.
And then when my mother confronted me about it, I lied. Mm-hmm. And then how she dealt with that,
awesome.
Which in hindsight,
it's going to make me want to read the book again.
Well,
I can't
in
remember
hindsight,
that. I remember reading the book, and it was fantastic.
Well, it dealt with a model car.
Okay.
And she taught me a very valuable life lesson from those early childhood.
We typically learn from those hard times more than we do the good times, don't we?
So I love cars, and I have since I was a
That's
kid.
wonderful. That's wonderful. So we're going to highlight that and look at your car in just a little bit.
Okay.
But out of all your cars, what's been your favorite? If you had to go back and say, man, I wish I had that one, which one you think it'd be?
I've been very blessed
in
my life as I've gone through these many years to financially be rewarded for hard work, just as you have and continue to be. And so I've been able to buy some fairly nice cars through the years. I've owned Mercedes, I've owned BMWs, I've owned Jaguars, Audis, Porsches. I had 911. I know you like Porsches.
Love the Porsche.
I've had two Panameras. Love that car. But more recently, in the last few years, I've bought 3 different kinds of Bentleys. And I would have to say,
a nice car.
Those cars are well made. They're powerful.
Those are handmade, I believe.
I believe you're right. Yeah. So I've got a Flying Spur, which is the 4-door sedan.
Okay.
4-door sedan. Yeah. I also have the 2-door Continental Coupe.
Is that the W12?
They are all W12s. They are powerful.
W12.
Yeah,
12 cylinders.
Ooh. And then I also I bought my wife, and she lets me drive it every now and then, the SUV. It's called a Ventega.
Ooh, I've seen those. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
Over at Carlock over here.
Yes, that's where I bought them.
Yeah.
So great cars. Those would be my favorite.
Nice. So we'll look at one of those a little bit later.
Great.
So, you have had a lot of success, and I've seen you, Nashville Business Journal, has ranked Churchill Mortgage one of the, top companies in all of Nashville. We've been ranked we, saying I work with Churchill Mortgage.
You're an owner in Churchill.
Yeah, we've been ranked, the top best place to work for
11
years in a row.
Yeah.
It's such a blessing here to be here. In fact, I was talking to one of our young guys here who's helping us film, and he was just talking about, wow, this place is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? And so you've really created such a wonderful thing. And most people just see when you're up on stage taking the reward, And tell me about the behind the scenes, the grind. What's that like? And is that necessary to be successful, or kind of getting back into our success questions and what helped you get to that Bentley?
Yeah. Well, number one, it is a grind.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but I would say most of the time it's a grind.
99%
Yeah.
of the time.
I mean, every day.
Just kind of the boring things that no one sees.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a hammering the nails, so to speak, in the business. And, my dad taught me as a little boy. He used to say to us in various ways, he would say, son, it's sunny outside today. Don't waste your day playing all day. Go do something constructive, because tomorrow it may be rainy.
Yeah.
Someday it'll be rainy.
Right.
And Dad taught me through not only his words, but his actions.
Yes.
They say actions speak louder than words.
Right.
And my dad and my mother taught me the high value of just getting out of bed every day and doing something constructive.
That reminds me what my dad used to say.
What was that?
He used to say, your actions speak so loudly I can't hear what you say.
Can't hear your words. Yeah. I've heard that, and that's good. So my point is, it's always fun.
Yeah.
When you go to these awards events that the Nashville Business Journal hosts, that the Tennessean newspaper hosts, that some of the mortgage banking periodicals association hosts, we've been so blessed through the years to win a lot of those awards. And it's always fun to get up on the stage and be recognized. And that's great, but it's the day-to-day, Monday through Friday, 8, 10, in those early years, it was 10 to 14-hour days. My 3 older children would tell you they remember times in those first 2 or 3, 4 years of Churchill Mortgage. We opened up in 1992. They would tell you they remember Dad not being home when they went to bed, and Dad getting home at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and getting back up at 5:30 to shower and shave, take the kids to school, and go right back to work. Because in those early days, and I would say this is probably true with any new business, you've got to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah,
and
you do.
So I remember I was talking this just the other day, as a matter of fact. My mother and father, as you know, they're both deceased now. They got married at age 18, and they started a church at that age.
Wow.
Dad said he just felt like he had a calling. Well, 60 years later, when he retired at age 78, the church had 10,000 members. So I would say he had a calling.
He did.
But those first 13 years of building that church, the church could not pay Mom and Dad a penny in salary.
It's like Noah building the ark.
Exactly.
For all those years, you just do it on faith.
You're grinding.
Yeah.
And they both worked full-time public jobs to feed us and clothe us.
So you had a great example. You had a great mentor and example of how to do something just a little differently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The same model.
Yeah. And so I learned from Dad so much, and that was one of the things. And so in business, most of the time it is a grind. I mean, you got your head down, you're doing the necessary job, and as you grow, you don't wear as many hats, but the fewer hats, or the hat you end up wearing, it's critically important that you seriously do that job well. Yeah. And so, but it's a grind.
Yeah. Well, and it's important for the people here that are going, how do I get something like a Bentley or a Porsche or something like that? How do I become successful And there's so many other reasons why you do that, not just for the car,
Right.
but this is talking about the car. But, the beautiful thing is it's the same discipline. It's just maybe a different business, right? Your father was building a church, right, for the Lord. And you built Churchill Mortgage for the Lord, I believe.
I believe that as well.
And it's a beautiful thing that you're able to, through your inspiration and hard work and grit and grind, you were able to influence so many people that may never darken the doorstep of a church.
Well, if you'll allow me, I'd like to correct one thing you just said. I did not build Churchill Mortgage.
Right.
I like to say we built it. Noah didn't build that ark all by himself. He did have a wife and some sons and children.
That's true.
And no, I've been blessed to have a lot of wonderful people, just like yourself, Kevin, that have come alongside me over these years. You know well, we've got scores of teammates here at Churchill Mortgage that have been here 15, 20, 25 years. We even have one other than me, Stephanie Christian Porter, that has been here 31 years. And so I didn't build it.
Right.
We built it.
That's true.
We built it.
Yeah, and it's you're right. It's always that.
Yeah.
Right, because I always think of the turtle that's on the fence post.
Yeah.
He didn't get there by himself.
He did not. Somebody put him up there. I love that. I love that.
You got to be humble and remember it's not all you.
Yeah.
But that's great.
For sure.
Well, let's go to another question that I have. Can you share a defining moment in your career or life that had a significant impact on your success, Mike? I know there's probably many of them.
There have been a few, but one really leaps out. It stands out because at the time it happened, it seemed like a massive failure and a massive defeat.
So when these things are happening, it could look like there's no end, there's no hope.
I thought about writing another book talking about 5 particular things that happened in my life over the years that at the time felt like failures, felt like defeats, but turned out to be a stepping stone to my next win, my next major
That
project.
happens a lot.
Yeah.
Andy Andrews had a book called Storms of Perfection. Remember when he would interview people about their failures and how they grew up? I think you ought to write it.
Well, maybe I will someday.
I'd love to read it.
The particular event that I'm talking about, Kevin, was in 1986, a long time ago. There was a singular piece of legislation that came out of Washington. Probably my favorite president of all time, President Ronald Reagan, actually partnered with Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker of the House at that time. They authored and got this piece of legislation passed. It was called the Tax Reform Act of 1986. And that singular act, I talk about this in detail in my book, but that singular act, of legislation was devastating to the real estate industry and the credit union, the savings and loan institution in that era. A lot of people are young enough, they don't really remember the savings and loan industry, the S&L industry. Back in those days, the vast majority of people, when they needed a new home loan, they didn't go to a mortgage broker or mortgage bank. There were very few, if any of them, around in that day. They went to their local S&L. And that singular piece of legislation, there were parts of it that were very needed and very good. The problem with it, from my perspective, and I think a lot of people now, is that for the first time in the history of our country, they made that piece of legislation effective, not just moving forward into the future, but they made it retroactive. And so a lot of real estate people who had invested in different kinds of real estate opportunities expecting tax write-offs, all of a sudden they lost them. And so what happened was a good part of the commercial real estate industry and the investment real estate industry lost anywhere from 40 to 50% of its value.
Wow.
And
that's a major hit.
Well, you think about today, if you bought a $500,000 home, got an 80% loan from Kevin Watson at Churchill Mortgage, which you should do.
That's right. Come on.
And you put 20% down.
Right.
Well, you put $100,000 down, you've got a $400,000 loan. What if a year or two or three after you bought that house and you still probably owe close to $400,000? What if the government instituted a new tax law that suddenly drove that $500,000 home value down to $200,000, and you owe $400,000?
You're upside down.
That's called being upside down or underwater in our industry. Yeah. And so what happened at that point, there were tens of thousands of investors who had borrowed money for those investments. They just defaulted. And the S&L industry went under. I could teach a PhD course on that, but that drove me.
I can see you being an adjunct professor at Belmont.
There you go. I was on the board at that one time. That single act of legislation drove me out of a job, shut the company down. I was running for a very wealthy family.
And you had about 200 employees there, didn't you?
Well, yeah, the family at that point was worth over $100 million in the mid-'80s. And they owned 6 different kinds of real estate companies with several thousand employees. They went bankrupt.
Goodness gracious.
Our good friend Dave Ramsey went bankrupt during that era, and I almost did. I lost pretty much everything I had. I went unemployed for 2 years. It was a tough time.
That's hard.
And I owed about $4 million to a lot of lenders, a lot of banks. And it was a tough time. But we made it through it by the hair of our chinny chin, as the old saying goes. We learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
And I believe we became better afterwards because of it. My dad used to say often, you're either going to become better or bitter.
I love that.
A lot of people became bitter during that time. I didn't want to become bitter.
Because you can't control sometimes what happens to you.
No.
But you can control your attitude.
Yeah.
We'd say also, what's your other
attitude with action is everything.
Yep.
So that really affected me. And it taught me a lot of things.
I remember you telling this story before. Can you tell us the person, you had a particular lunch meeting with someone, and they said something to you that I'd love for the people out there to hear, because I believe that is something that we all need to hear.
Yeah. Well, have we got 3 or 4 hours?
Let's do it. Let's do it. We can edit.
The person you're talking about, his name is Mike Ballard. Mike had been up and down at least twice, maybe 3 times at that point. And when I say up, he had made a lot of money, lost it, made it again, lost it, and had worked for me for a season of time. He knew what I was going through. And he called me up one day. I hadn't seen him in a few months. And said, hey, I want to take you to lunch. And I said, great, I need you to. I don't have any money. So we went to lunch at a restaurant up in Brentwood. I think it was called Pargo's at the time.
I remember Pargo's.
Yeah. We got there that afternoon probably around 3:30 or 4 o'clock, so we were pretty much the only people in the restaurant. It was between lunch and dinner. And we're sitting there, and Mike made the fatal mistake of saying, well, Hardwick, what's going on in your world?
Oh, boy.
So I waxed eloquent for about 30 or 45 minutes about how bad things had gotten, how tough life was. It was kind of the old proverbial crying in your beer conversation.
Sure.
And when I finished, he looked at me. Mike is a rather heavy-set fella. He's one of these guys with real puppy dog eyes. At that point, he was a chain smoker. And he always had a cigarette in his mouth. And it's okay for you folks that smoke. I don't, I don't like it. Yeah. So he's smoking, the smoke's filtering around my face, and he leans forward across the table, looked me right in the eye, and he said, Hardwick, you want me to tell you what your problem is? And I said, yeah, Ballard, what's my problem? And he said one simple thing that when he said it, frankly, it did not sit well with me. I had several thoughts that pierced through my mind in a nanosecond. Had too much pride to verbalize any of them to him. He was probably the only person in my life that could actually say this to me at the time.
Gotcha.
And while it frustrated me, maybe even angered me, I didn't write him off. He looked at me and he said, I hope it's all right to say this word because this is exactly what he said. He said, hell, Hardwick, you've lost your faith in God.
Mm. That's a bold statement. My response, my pride-driven response, I looked at him and I said, well, boy, Mike, I hope not. Pray for me. Yeah.
And we kind of wrapped up our lunch. I went back to the office. My office at that point was like a tomb. It was 8,000 square feet, beautiful office space. It was me and one other person still there. Laid them off 2 or 3 weeks later. Mm. Quiet. I sat there in my office. I'm thinking, what in the world does he mean? I've lost my faith in God. I go to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. You remember back in the day, that's what we did.
That's right.
I lead praise and worship at my church. I teach a young married couples class at my church. I sit on the board at the church. My father's the pastor of the church. What do you mean I've lost my faith in God? And I dwelt on that. Then I go home. That night, Kevin, about midnight, I'm sitting in my den. Wife has gone to bed. The kids have gone to bed. It's quiet, so quiet. And I cannot get that thought off my mind. And so, honestly, I reached down and got the newspaper, start reading an article in my favorite section of the paper, the sports. And course. I read an entire article, and then I think, I read every word in that article, but none of it read. I don't even know what I just read.
Isn't that funny?
It's frustrating. So I laid it down, and my Bible was laying on my coffee table. So I picked my Bible up, and I just randomly opened it up to a passage. I couldn't even tell you what the passage was now. Read a chapter. Again, I was reading the words, but they weren't connecting in my brain. I lay the Bible down. I'm just totally frustrated. And so I think, okay, I need to pray and try to get to bed. So I start praying the way I often do. I'm praying in my mind, not out loud. Yeah. I didn't want to wake up anybody. So I've got my eyes closed and I'm praying, and I'm praying, okay, Lord, thank you for a beautiful day, and thank you for my family, and thank you for this, my health, and thank you for that. And as I'm going through the thank yous, it's almost like, I don't know if the Lord said this to me. I don't know. Maybe it was bad pizza the night before. Who knows? But I thought, okay, I need to deal with the elephant in the room. Well, what was that? Ballard telling me I'd lost my faith in God.
Yeah.
And so I started praying about that a little bit. I said, okay, God, Ballard said this today, and I haven't lost my faith in you. I went through those things that I was doing, going to church, teaching the class, on the board, pastor's son, leading, all those things I was doing. And as I'm praying those things, my mind, I don't know, it just kind of started dawning on me, and I thought, you know what? Have I lost my faith in you, Lord? Has that really unwittingly, unintentionally, has that happened to me? Yeah. And I believe, Kevin, that the Lord showed me that night that I had unwittingly, slowly, you've heard the story about if you put a frog in a pail of cold water, and you turn the oven or the stove on underneath it, and slowly, you'll bring that water slowly to a boil, the frog will never jump out. It'll cook him to death, right? And I think the Lord showed me that night that I had slowly, there's a scripture that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Yes. And I think the Lord showed me that night that I unwittingly changed that a little bit. And it became, I can do all things through my great income that I've got. I can do all things through my assets that I had a lot of at the time.
Right.
Heavy laden with debt, I might add. Yeah. I can do all things through one of the two great mentors in my life, my owner boss at that time, Mr. Freeman. Well, now he's bankrupt.
Right.
And the Lord began to show me, I've placed my faith somewhere else. All these things are gone now, Mike.
Yeah.
What you going to do?
Right.
And I thought, wow, the Lord gave it all to me.
Yeah.
It's all His at the end of the day. He just allowed me to benefit from it, enjoy it, and maybe I wasn't using those things the way He wanted me to. And Kevin, quite honestly, tying a ribbon on this, when I realized that night, I literally, and I don't know if this is what you want on your podcast, but I literally got on my knees and I repented of that. I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, I'm sorry. I get it. I see it. And help me to reposition my faith where it always was and where it needs to be rightly. It needs to be back on you. I can do all things through you, whatever those things are. Mm-hmm. And that night was a turning point in my mind, my attitude, my focus. And it wasn't too long after that. I don't remember now. I'm an old guy, and it's been a long time. But it wasn't too long after that I came up with a new idea. And a good friend of mine, Richard Harrington.
Yes.
Richard and I were neighbors at that time. We had worked together at First American National Bank years prior. Richard and I get together, and we come up with this idea, why don't we start a new bank?
There you go.
What? I mean, I've never started a bank. I didn't know how to do that, but Richard and I got together, and we began putting the ideas together, and 2 years later, we opened up on December 1 of 1989, Franklin National Bank on the square in Franklin, Tennessee. We built that bank together with a lot of good employees and a lot of good shareholders and people. Over the next 13 years, we built that bank to a $1 billion asset bank. Mm. And we sold that bank for the highest multiple any community bank in America had ever sold for, and may still hold that record. Now, Kevin, let me quickly add, that was a God thing in my mind. I often say, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Mm-hmm. I resemble that remark.
I'm not the dullest.
Right.
But, I'm not smart enough to go start a bank of my own. Now I've done it twice. I've got Studio Bank in Nashville. But God gave me that idea. And James 1:5 says, if any man or person lack in wisdom, if you'll ask the Lord for wisdom, listen to this. It doesn't just say He'll give it to you. He says He'll give it to you generously. Mm. God gave me that idea. God worked in the mind of Richard Harrington, Mike Hardwick, Gordon Inman, Eddie Ritchie, Ed Silva, Wilson Overton. There were 8 of us guys ultimately. He gave us that idea. That was the beginning of my financial comeback. And that was in 1989. Then I stayed on the board. I held all my stock, but I started Churchill Mortgage in 92. Well, we all know Churchill over 31 years. We're now in 46 states. So, that's Mike amazing. Ballard, thank you for waking me up and being willing to look me right in the eye.
That's my favorite story.
And say, Mike, you've lost your faith in God.
I love that. Thank you you even gave us more details and so that was great. It's funny you referenced James because that's one of my favorite, the first couple chapters of James. Yeah. 1 verse 2, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds.
Yeah, that's hard.
That's a tough one because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work so you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Yeah. And that's a great example of how we become more mature. Yeah. Right?
Well, and if I can add one more thing, that experience of losing everything, starting over, and then seeing God use Mike Ballard, and to wake me up and to get me back where I need to be emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That has stayed, that has been an invaluable lesson to me through the years because, Kevin, as you know, right now in the mortgage industry,
yes,
we're experiencing right now arguably the most difficult mortgage season that I've been in and around the mortgage business over 40 years. We've had Churchill Mortgage going now over 31 years. It's tough. We've got good friends who own mortgage companies that have had to close their doors.
Yes.
The industry has probably had to lay off roughly 50% of the people who were working in mortgage companies just 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Churchill Mortgage is not exempt from that.
Yep.
But having been through what I went through then has given me the ability to not panic,
right,
to trust, to pray James 1:5, to believe the scripture there in James that you've referenced.
1:2.
Yeah. And not panic. Of course we experience some level of anxiety,
a
little fear, maybe, if you want to say that.
I remember us going to, one thing that I love about what you've done in your leadership to me is continue to teach me and coach me, and sometimes it's through others.
Yeah.
So we went to an entree leadership, Dave Ramsey entree leadership one time, and Jocko Willink was there. And my favorite part is when you get in the middle of the S storm, right, then prioritize and execute.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we have to do.
You know, Winston Churchill said the same thing with slightly differently. He said it like this: when you're going through hell,
right,
keep going.
Keep going.
Don't stop.
Keep
going.
There's a country song about that.
Prioritize
right?
and execute. Yeah. Keep going.
Right.
Keep
Devil may not even know you're there.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for elaborating on that.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah.
We could make that its own podcast. That was amazing. Let me see if I can read the rest of this here. So I'm gonna have to put on my glasses because
I just did.
Being 54, it's real here. Okay. So what are some key habits or practices that have contributed to your success? Because I know we talk about our values and some things. So maybe is there a routine that you do daily, or is there something that you do that's just helped you continue to grow and mature and become better and better?
You know, are you promoting my book? Because all these questions, I've talked about a lot of them in my book. I address this topic. As a matter of fact, at the end of the book, I was bold enough to give a list of 8 or 10 things that I think are good daily habits, daily disciplines, that cover several areas of our life: our physical health, our emotional well-being, our spiritual well-being, business practices and whatnot. But one of the things I like to do and I try to do, and I'm good about it most days. I'm not. Right. My wife reminds me, "You're not Jesus." So I don't. I'll have a day or two here where I don't do. But when I first get up, the first thing I do is I go drink a bottle of water. Mm-hmm. I had a doctor years ago tell me, just like you get up every day and you cleanse the outside of your body, you should drink a bottle of room temperature water to begin the cleansing process in your inner body. But I do that, and then I put on my glasses, go into my office there at the house, and I open up the Word of God. And I've got 3 or 4 devotional books that I read. And many times my wife, Kathleen, will join me in that. Often she does. But, I like to start my day usually fairly quiet and focus mainly on getting my mind right for the day.
Yes.
And a big part of that for me is making sure that I've honored the Lord and that I've given the Lord some opportunity to speak into my mind. And so
I like to call that tithing your time.
That's good.
It's the first part of your day.
That's good.
So it's
I
the
like
first
that.
part of your time.
Man, if I'd had that, I'd put that in my book.
That'll be the second version.
I do that. Another thing, Winston Churchill, obviously I'm a big fan of Winston Churchill. We named this company after him 31 years ago. But, he went through a lot of trials, tribulations, ups and downs, made a lot of mistakes. But he never let those mistakes define him. He kept going. He didn't quit. He kept growing. He kept trying. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, almost every single time, he came back better and stronger. Mm-hmm. He supposedly gave a commencement address at, I believe it was either Oxford or Cambridge, I don't remember which. And his commencement address they said was one of the shortest, if not the shortest ever. When they announced him, introduced me, he walks up to the microphone, as I understand it. Hope I've got this right. And he looked over his glasses, which were on his nose, at all the graduates out in cap and gown sitting out in front of him, and he just paused and looked at them. Backed away and pondered them a little bit more, and then he leaned into the microphone and he said, and I wish I could sound the way he did, but he basically said, never quit. And he backed away, and apparently they applauded. And then he leaned in again and he says, never give up. He backed away, they applauded again. And then he leaned in one more time. I said, never quit, never give up. That was his speech.
Wow.
Now you think about that, and I wrote a book, Keep Chopping Wood. I'd love to do a podcast sometime and tell you the genesis of that, where I came up with that title. It's a great story.
Well, you've got 3 cars, so we got 3 podcasts, right?
There you go. I talk about that in my book. If you're listening today, go to Amazon.com and buy Keep Chopping Wood. You'll love it.
Yes, it's a great read.
Anyway, I one thing I've learned is you're going to get knocked down. It's funny. My wife and I talked about this yesterday morning when we first woke up, and we talked about it again this morning. Life throws you curveballs.
Yes.
Life throws everybody curveballs. Sometimes you're young or middle-aged or old. You're going to have a financial setback. You're going to have a health issue. You're going to have an issue with some of your children from time to time. You're going to have a crisis of faith. You're going to lose a job. Life is going to throw you curveballs. My good friend Christopher Freeman wrote a little book, and the title of his book, I love it. It's a long title. It said, When Life Throws You a Curveball. And I'll digress and say, note, he didn't say if.
Yeah.
When.
Yeah. When
life throws you a curveball, ... hit it. I love that title.
Hit it.
Okay. So Kathleen and I were talking about this the last 2 mornings. And when you're in the batter's box, you and I both played baseball.
Yes, sir.
When you're in the batter's box, maybe you're not that great a hitter, and you're waiting on a fastball. Mm-hmm. And that pitcher, I'll be doggone if he doesn't throw you a curve, and you freeze.
Right.
Okay, strike 1.
Right.
Well, the good news is you get 2 more strikes, right?
Right.
Okay, so you're waiting on another fastball, and he throws you another curveball, and you see it, you realize what it is, and so you feebly swing, and you miss it. Strike 2. Well, you still got 1 more strike, right?
Right.
In life, when he throws you curveballs, you've heard this. I read this in a little thing I read just this morning. Fight, flight, or freeze.
That's right.
Fight, flight, or freeze. Curveball. You're either going to freeze, and it's going to be a called strike usually, or you're going to fight. You're going to swing at it, or thirdly, you're going to swing big and hit a home run,
right,
or hit a single, whatever. And that's life. You're going to get hit with things you don't like, things that are tough. It's up to you. You said this a while ago. You can't. You're not responsible for a lot of things that happen to you. Now, we are responsible for some things based on poor choices.
Right.
But in life, you're not overly responsible for a lot of things that come at you, but you are responsible for how you deal with them. You can either run, you can quit, or you can do your best, hang in there, and come back. And so I love Winston Churchill. Don't quit. Yeah. Keep swinging. Keep chopping wood. lastly, on that question, which I'm not even sure I remember what it was now, but I'm on a roll. So
daily routines. And
I go back, Kevin. If I've learned anything in 40 plus years of work and being in business, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with.
True.
You're only as good. And we've been very fortunate through the years here, particularly Churchill. I believe right now we have the best senior leadership, and even a lot of our mid-level managers, but our senior leadership here is rock solid. I would put it up against any mortgage company in America. Mm-hmm. So we're blessed with great leaders, and I've been a huge benefactor of being able to not be afraid to hire people smarter than me in certain areas, trust them, turn them loose, and it's number one.
It takes a lot of humility to do that, though, to go, hey, I'm hiring people that are smarter than me, but they're so good at that specialty that you need that guidance and help. Yeah. And like we talked about the little turtle, up on the Pitts post, there's no way to get to where you were and where we gotten without those great people.
Well, I never could have built Churchill into what it has become without people like that.
I agree. Well, we talked a little bit about this, but we talked about how you handle failures or setbacks. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that. I know you had talked about being bitter or better, and I love that part.
I think that's the key is when the setback comes, have an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah.
Have an attitude that I'm not going to let this knock me down, defeat me. I'm not going to get bitter. I'm not going to blame others, no matter if some of it was a result of others, like the U.S. government and the tax reform activity. Yeah. I had no control over that.
About that. Yeah.
But I'm not going to blame others. I'm going to work hard every day, and I'm going to become a better person because of this, and then trust the results.
Right.
I've got a saying, we used to have it on the walls of our former offices up in Brentwood, and the saying was this: if you do the right, and I always capitalize the word right there, if you do the right activities with the right people consistently over time, then the results you're seeking tend to follow.
I agree.
So key things there. Are you doing the right things consistently?
Right.
Are you doing them sporadically?
Right.
Are you the turtle or are you the hare?
Right.
So are you doing the right activities consistently, and are you doing them with the right people? Mm-hmm. There have been times in my life I hired the wrong people, and I had to step back, retreat, learn, and then move on.
Amen.
So
I agree.
A few thoughts there.
Yeah. So when we first started talking, we kind of touched on this, but life balance. Tell me about, I thought it was interesting. You said, hey, there's times where when I was first starting this company that I was home at 2 a.m. Yeah. So here's my thought, and you tell me what you think. My thought is life balance is sort of an illusion, that there are times in your life that you have to put more energy into one thing to get the going, to get the momentum going. And then there's times where you have to put energy into other things, other parts of your life. What are your thoughts about balancing life? Because you don't want to just work and not have a family or anyone to share it with. Right. So what do you think on that?
I read a book, my goodness, probably 25 to maybe 30 years ago, probably close to 30 years ago. The title of the book was Your Work Matters to God. And if I'm remembering correctly, the author of that book talked about life balance. And in his opinion, there were 5 key areas of life. Let's see if I can remember them. Our work life, our family life, our spiritual life, our personal health, and our community life. What are we doing for others around us? Right. Those 5 areas. And he said, and I think you just touched on it a little bit, most people are a little out of balance. Some are a lot out of balance in one or more areas of those lives. For example, there are men and women who their career is so important to them that they pour everything they've got into their career, and they lose their family.
Right.
They lose their influence with their children.
Yeah.
They may go through a divorce, whatever. We've all messed up, made mistakes of some degree like that. Others, my dad, who was a minister, used to say, some people are so spiritually minded,
Right.
they're no earthly good.
Right.
And people like that, boy, they're at church every time the doors are open. They're at every prayer meeting. They're at every visitation. They're at every church social, even if it means they don't go to a lot of their kids' events.
Right.
You know?
Right.
There are other people who are in the gym 2, 3, 4 hours a day, and boy, they look physically great. Mm-hmm. Can't keep a job,
right?
Because the job's not that important to them.
Right.
So my point is, we all, it's easy to get out of balance.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, you got to recognize that you've got 4 or 5 key areas in your life, and you want to make sure you're paying enough attention to each of those areas.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like stepping on the scales and checking your weight in each one of those each day.
Yeah. And so now balance.
Yeah.
I like what you said a while ago. You think about it, if you're sleeping, let's say 8 hours a day, mm-hmm. that leaves you 16 hours a day, right?
Right.
Well, if you're going to be balanced in the true sense, we're in all 5, you're only going to spend 3 or 4 hours at work.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 hours in the gym, and
possible.
3 or 4 hours at church, and 3 or 4 hours. No, so balance is somewhat of an illusion. Here's where I come down. When I'm at work, I'm at work.
Right.
You and I are at work right now.
Right.
We're in the Churchill Mortgage offices, and we're working.
We're actually in the Victory Room,
which we
named after Winston Churchill.
When I'm here, I work. And now my wife knows. I told her today, I said, babe, when you're free this afternoon, call me and let me know, do we want to go out to dinner, and do you want to meet me or me come get you? And I so appreciate what she said. She says, Mike, you'll be at work. You've got Studio Bank board meeting. You've got your podcast interview. You've got a lot of things. She says, why don't you call me?
That's a good idea.
When you're ready to talk about that. That was her being kind and loving.
That kind of balances with the key to a successful man.
Yeah.
Is right. A supportive, loving wife at home or at work or wherever they are. Right.
Yeah. And so when I'm at home, I take a phone call from you or Matt or one of my key leaders while I'm at home? Yes, I do it. But I'm 99%, I am focused on Kathleen.
Yep.
I'm focused on my children, my grandchildren. So my point there is focus. When you're working out for that hour a day or hour 10 or whatever, don't leave your cell phone in the locker.
Right.
You know, when you're out relaxing on the golf course, are you going to let your phone ring 10 times when you're on the golf? Right. Focus on your golf. When I'm with my family, except for extreme emergencies, I'm focused on my family.
Yeah.
And when I'm at work, with rare exception, now if my wife called me right now, I'd say, Kevin, can we pause the podcast? My wife is calling.
Yeah.
If Matt called me, I'd hit call you later.
Yes.
Love Matt. He's critically important.
Yes.
But just that intense focus, and then wake up years later and say, you know what, my spiritual health is good. My physical health, you talk about weighing yourself on the scales every day of my life pretty well.
Yes.
I step on those scales, and I keep my weight between 180 and 185. That's a goal of mine. Mm-hmm. Focus, and you wake up years later, and you can look back mostly. We'll all have regrets. I'll have things. I've got things right now I regret. I wish I had done them differently.
Sure.
But by far and large, you wake up and you realize God's been good, and I'm okay.
Yeah. And wake up 30 years later, you're a success, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm planning on living to 120.
Nice.
We'll do another podcast on that sometime, and I'll explain to you why. But
that's what God said we could go to.
That's right. So I better keep my weight right. I better eat reason.
Well, I know you're in good shape. You and I went downhill on a ski trip not too long ago, and I was having a hard time keeping up with you.
68.3 miles an hour.
We were doing it. Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But so let me ask you this, Mike. I know your business has been very successful. What about real estate? Is real estate a wise idea to get into if you're a young person listening to this and you're thinking, man, these rates are terrible, and they don't really know if house prices are going to go up or down. We know they're going to probably continue to go up based on the demographics and the shortage of supply. But how important has real estate been for your, I guess, investment portfolio and success?
Well, Kevin, the vast majority of people in their younger years don't have dollars to invest.
Right.
Very many, certainly.
Right.
My first investments were real estate, and Dave Ramsey did the same thing, and we leveraged it pretty highly.
Right.
And my first 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of real estate that I actually bought. Actually, I bought them with a friend who put the cash up, and I put in what was called sweat equity.
Yes.
I went and cut the grass. When the renters moved out, I went and painted and cleaned the appliances and shampooed the carpets. I didn't have money, so he and I were 50-50 partners. He was a dentist, and a dear friend of mine to this day, retired. But he put up the money, I put up the sweat, and we did some duplexes. We sold them, made money, leveraged that into more and more and more. Real estate, you mentioned going up or down in value. I believe I'm right on this. For the last 70 or 80 years, real estate is really only, now I'm talking nationwide. Of course, you can find a town or a community here or there where, industry has moved to China and jobs have been lost and values crater for a while. But as a general rule in our country for the last 70 to 80 years, real estate's only gone down in value of a accord one time, and that was 07, 08, 09.
That's right.
And that was due to
oversupply.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So having said that, real estate, generally speaking, goes up. Sometimes it goes up very fast. Sometimes it goes up very slowly. It rarely ever goes down.
Yes.
And even with rates up right now, if you're waiting to buy until rates come down and real estate values come down, you're probably going to lose out. You're probably going to lose out.
Yeah.
It's going to be too late. And so what I say to family and friends who ask me that very question is, if you find a home that you like and works for you, and it's at a price you can afford, negotiate, get the best deal you can, and buy the thing. Yeah. And know that in a year or 2 or 5 or 10, however long it takes, when rates come back down, and they always go up, they always go down, we can refinance you and lower those monthly payments. But now real estate has been and continues to be a really core piece of my investment portfolio. It always has been, and it is right now.
I agree. And it's smart to be diverse, right? But I was talking to a gentleman yesterday. We were looking at helping him buy a home. And he said, I may wait until these rates go down so I can get a better payment. And I said, can I help you understand why that's not a wise idea? And he said, yeah, I'd love to learn. This is what I hear, from the news and whatnot. And I said, the home price was around $600,000. And I said, okay, now you bought at $600,000 and let's say rates are in the mid sevens. That's going to cost you. We looked, it was going to cost them maybe versus rates in the mid fives. That's going to cost them maybe about $4,000 in a year, right? The difference between the rate.
Yeah.
And I said, but the problem is psychologically, when rates go under 6%, then there's something with buyers that you're going to see a huge flood.
Competition.
You're going to see a huge flood into the market. We're already 6 million low nationwide in inventory. And what's going to happen is that $600,000 house, you're now going to have to pay $700,000 to get it.
Yeah.
And so now you lost $100,000 to save $4,000.
Well, think about it this way, Kevin. Even if it doesn't go to $700,000,
right?
Let's say it goes to $640,000.
Right.
That's $40,000 more if you're that $4,000 in savings is going to take you 10 years to get it back.
Yes, exactly.
So no, it's
and so
I believe it's
and he was
always.
He was like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Thank you for helping me understand that. So we're trying to get that message out to say, guys, please, as we're kind of used the saying of, go ahead and marry the house, but date the rate. We can always redo that rate for you later with a no closing cost loan or a regular closing cost loan, but we'll evaluate that at that time to see which was better.
Well, obviously, I've spent my career, 71 years old. I've spent my entire career in the banking and real estate industry.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm a massive believer. Personally, it's been hugely beneficial to me and my family to invest wisely, cautiously and wisely, in good real estate.
Yeah.
It's been the best thing I've done, probably financially.
I agree. My wife and I have been very blessed for the real estate that we've bought and done. Well, guys, if any of you are just wondering how to be successful, I hope you take this and digest this information and listen to it over and over, because there were some great nuggets in this conversation and some great wisdom that I prayed this morning, Mike, that God would be here with us and he would bless this conversation, and he certainly has. There's been a lot of good wisdom. And I hope and I pray that it will bless others by hearing this, that they can do some of the things that you've done, take some of those values and learn. And if any of you want to get into real estate, let us help you. We have a heart of a teacher here at Churchill Mortgage, and we want to help you. We really do. Even if the answer is not yet, right? It's never no. It's just not yet, or it's yes, right? And it's kind of how God works, right? Sometimes he says not yet, and sometimes he says yes. So thank you, Mike, for being part of this. I can't wait to see the car. So we'll go down and look at that, and we'll have some pictures up about that and go from there.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a real privilege and honor and a lot of fun. So
it has been fun.
Me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Yeah.